Patrick Cook here. So welcome to session number 5 of Mandelbulb3D Epic Rendering, a tutorial series that we intend to take a look at how we can use the Mandelbulb3D software application to create high-resolution images. You know, it's reasonable to ask, well, why do we need high-resolution images? All right. I mean, if we take a look at the screen here, I mean, I've got a 9,000 by 6,000 resolution image here, in this case, rendered out. Now, that 9,000 by 6,000 will give me a 30-inch by 20-inch printout. All right. Now, this is assuming, of course, that you want to do a printout, where you send the electronic file off to a printing service, and then they will use their equipment and they will print you with ink onto some sort of a medium. Could be canvas, it could be acrylic, it could be metal, it could be paper. All right, and then you get that back and you put it up on your wall. That's cool. All right. And there are people that have full businesses where they are, and galleries, physical galleries at specific locations, you know, where they will they will have their art printed and then, of course, for sale. Okay, so if you wanted to do a print, you need to pay pretty close attention to, well, you know, a variety of factors. And one of those factors is resolution. Here's the basics of it. When you want to have an electronic file that is printed, physically printed, you want your resolution of your electronic file to be as close as possible to the resolution that they will be printing. In other words, you want to avoid the printer upscaling or downscaling. Now, what this upscaling is all about is that if you gave them, if their print machinery was looking for, say, 300 dots per inch, and you give them an electronic image that has 150 dots per inch, okay, then what's going to happen is that their printing software is going to try to add pixels. It'll say, look, I've got a blue pixel, I've got a red pixel, but I need twice as many pixels, so I'm going to start adding pixels, and then this software interpolates what the color of that new pixel would be based upon pixels on either side of it. Boom. All right. It's a pretty clever process. But what they're doing is they're actually adding pixels to your image, and you really want to avoid that. So ideally, you don't give them an electronic image file that they're going to have to play that kind of game on, because what they would be doing is trying to upscale it. They're trying to add pixels. Now, so if I was to say to somebody, look, you know, I want a 30-inch print, but I'm only going to give you 4,500 pixels, well, you're going to force them to upscale, or they will try to print it with basically not enough pixels. And then they're going to ship it back to you, and you are not going to be happy, because what's going to happen is the pixels will essentially be pulled apart in order to get, say, 4,500 pixels that would print nicely at this, but you want to print it like that. They pull the process would pull these pixels apart, and it would look terrible. Your details wouldn't be there. Your tones would be all thrown off. And you would not be happy. So printers normally don't do that. If you give them an inadequate file, in terms of resolution, they're going to say, look, you sure you want to do this? Because it's not going to look good. Or, and most likely, they'll simply upscale it for you and make you happy. All right? If you care about your art, you won't allow that to happen. You won't allow somebody else to be in charge of the pixel, the resolution of your image. That's upscaling. You also don't want them to downscale. In other words, if I was to send the printer, they need 9,000, but I send them 20,000, all right, on the width now, okay. Their machinery, their software, is going to say, well, we don't need 20,000, and we can't even print 20,000 because the ink dots are just too close, okay? They have to have a certain separation of these ink dots, okay? They're going to throw away most of the excess pixels. If you give them 20,000, they only need 9,000, or the machine will only work with 9,000, okay, on the width now. They're going to throw away what? 11,000 pixels. That's downscaling. You don't want them to downscale. You don't want them to upscale. You don't want them to downscale. You want to get as close as possible to what the requirements of the printer are. All right, so that they don't monkey around with your electronic image to make it work in the printing scenario. Okay, so why am I making a big deal of this is because if you have any intention of printing your Mandelbulb artwork, all right, whether you do it for your own pleasure, or you do it because you want to sell, or sell the prints, or you want to gift the prints to a friend or another Mandelbulb enthusiast, whatever the case may be, you want to target for your electronic image to have the attributes, the pixel, okay, quantity that is appropriate and closely matched to the printer. You also want to closely match the color and some other attributes as well. But we're talking about resolution right now. So the Mandelbulb application does give you the ability to get a large print, but up to a point. There's a point at which the Mandelbulb application isn't well, it's going to fail you, actually. All right. Now I want to save that topic, the limitations of the Mandelbulb application. I want to save that topic for the next session. But let's just kind of conclude here by reiterating that you want to utilize your capabilities of the Mandelbulb3D software application. You want to utilize its capabilities so that you closely match what a physical print vendor is going to want in order to give you the highest possible quality of the returned print as possible. And you do not want that printer to get in there and do any more modifications to your electronic file than is absolutely necessary. You have the ability to achieve that particular goal, but you kind of need to know your way around the Mandelbulb3D application and the tools that you have in order to achieve that goal. And that's why we're here in this tutorial series, okay? All right, so when we come back, we're going to talk about the limitations that you're faced with and how we can get around those limitations in terms of high resolution image files. Okay, I'll see you in the next session.